young India hungry for opportunities, a country that wants access to the best quality education and top-class employment. But is the crisis in India's higher education letting our young down? That's what we're looking at today, a special panel with me. Let me start by introducing them. Dr. Vijay Gupta, Vice-Chancellor of Sharda University, here with us, as is Professor M. Balakrishnan, Professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at IIT Delhi. Also with us, Anurag Jain, Senior VP and Product Head, Shiksha.com. And joining us from Bangalore, Venu Narayan, Director of the School of Liberal Arts at the Azim Premji University. Thanks all so much for taking our time to speak to us. Professor Balakrishnan, let me start by asking you, how would you say to get the IIT experience to most students, especially given our demographic numbers, who deserve it?
I think it's a great challenge, but on one hand, I must compliment what's happening as a national policy of increasing the number of institutions. So every year, government is actually starting new IITs, which in my opinion, a very positive step. But having said that, I do not see that what we are even doing, it can actually scale to the level that we really need.
Right.
So the reason, if you look upon it, so there is a way that the education is today, quality education is seen, is itself is unscalable. The reason is that when we say it's a very good institution, so what we are expecting is that the faculty is engaged in high quality research.
Research, right, right.
It cannot scale in the private sector in the model that we are talking about, where the students have to still by and large pay the fees for a university to run. This only works in public models.
Right. There are, of course, also one reason for that perhaps is that the big headlines are usually taken by so many students from IIT, and this is how much money they're making, and IIM students, and this is what happened in on-campus placement, look at the fat salary. So that is sort of, it's like a vicious circle that we find ourselves trapped in, isn't it?
I think that's natural. The education today is largely for getting an employment.
Right.
Most of the kids who go to college don't go there for education, they go there for preparing themselves for a job. So they would definitely go for those areas where they believe the jobs are, where the jobs may be there or may not be there, but where they believe the jobs are.
And you can't blame them for that.
You can't blame them for that. That is natural. But the question of teachers that you say, or the shortage of teacher, if I may have my say on this, I think it is largely because why would I go into teaching if I've seen my teachers, bad teachers?
Right.
If my teachers are there whom I can make fun of, then why would I want to go into teaching?
Right. So you're saying if I've had teachers whose qualification is
you see,
suspect.
Most teachers that the students come across are not that they would like to emulate. And if they would not like to emulate them, they are not role models in any sense. So that's why teaching profession is at a discount.
I want to actually make one point. You see, the problem is when we say good teachers, when I say a faculty at IIT, whom I am recruiting, please remember almost all IITs are recruiting faculty not for their teaching capability. There we are essentially looking at that this person will still be able to inspire his students by teaching. He may or may not be very articulate in the class. Whereas on the other hand, you can have extremely good professional teachers who are excellent communicators, just like films. Stars.
Right. If you look at it from a student's perspective, a lot of decisions they make, even for coaching classes or which institutions to go, is either because of the brand or because of a certain star faculty, or it's because the peers that they're going to have over there are going to contribute to their learning experiences. So put together, I mean, definitely you need to have depth and breadth of knowledge, but I would say even the ability to impart that in simple language to students becomes very critical for their learning outcomes.
Right. I just want to speak a bit about, Mr. Narayan, to speak to you a bit about the research that we are talking about. Now, there's the low quality of teaching and learning as something that we've gone into, but also on research capacity, like we're hearing Professor Balakrishnan say now, we have a very low level of PhD enrollment. Research in India has you've always had people scoffing and saying, youngsters saying, I want to do research, and India wasn't the place to do it. So I went out to do it, and you hear these kind of stories all the time, that we are not the country where research or there's a weak ecosystem for innovation. But do you see any of that changing? Because again, we see more and more focus on it. We see increasingly top tier institutions, when they talk about themselves, talk about their research, talk about what they're contributing to their field, the sort of the depth and breadth of knowledge that we were just talking about.
See, one of the problems we have is the polarization of the higher education sector, where you have a small group of well-funded elite institutions on the top and a very large number of teaching institutions where very little research or either by the students or the faculty takes place. I think keeping in mind the issue of resources that Professor Balakrishnan raised, I would say that we can broaden how the scope of research in most institutions. So we can attempt to make research, not necessarily published or expensive research, but research to be part of an undergraduate curriculum, for example.
Increasingly, we have people writing to us say, tell us where to go, where we can be picked up on campus. You try and probe them and say, where does your interest lie? What do you want to do? All that seems to come later. Coming back to the point that you said that at the end of the day, it's all about employment. That's not ideal, is it?
Well, that's not ideal, but that's what most people are going to do. If we believe in mass education, you see, the education as a pursuit of knowledge is a very different thing in education for making a living. And mass education can only be education for making a living. Right. We should not get away from this. Right. You see, this whole idea about research, increasing the research. There are a very large number of US universities, teaching institutions, where they have no emphasis on research at all. And they do a very good job teaching, much better than some of our leading research universities in our country. So, making this connection that teaching can take place only in the environment of research, I think is a very dubious statement to make. Second, what was just being said about making undergraduate research, even if it's non-publishable. Yes, that is the model. Research as a method of inquiry. If you think the education, you give education to kids where you make them inquire into things where they do a little bit of work. You see, school kids are asked to do projects, research projects. They're not publishable research, right. But they learned the method of inquiry in learning anything. And that is what we should do. Yes, right. Undergraduate education should be
right. So you're saying there are a whole lot of criteria that you should look at before you sort of say that what is the top quality. Research may be one of them, but it's not be all and end all. Before I take a break, I'm going to get everyone to respond to that. Mr. Narayan, respond to that. So would it be fair to say that there's no really one size fits all when we talk about higher education, or what a top quality institution should be like?
The crisis in higher education is not just one crisis. It is it's many such crises, which includes a crisis of provision and access, a crisis of curriculum, teaching and learning, and a crisis of organizations and regulation. So we need to, as a society, address all of them, right? And allow a huge diversity of institutions, approaches and curricula to flower, so that we are a country of 1.2 billion. One size fits all approach will just not work. And as a growing economy, we now have a far more diverse set of occupations and jobs available. So we cannot have a hierarchy of just 5 or 6 professions which are the most desired.
Sure, can't have a hierarchy of just 5 or 6 professions, can't have just a handful of institutions. We keep saying that if we don't educate our people, then our demographic dividend is going to become a demographic disaster, because the least we can do is get everyone this quality, this access to top quality education. But before I slip into a quick break, Anurag Jain, how do we sort of, again, coming back to access, there are all those, the business of education is big, there's no getting away from it. If we are a country where parents will do anything to finance your education, how do we break away from this? Because we haven't been able to do that despite much sort of hand-wringing and chest beating and greater control and tighter controls, but the business of education is big business.
It's a challenge, you know, if you really look at the supply-demand gap that we referred to in the beginning, right? And you look at the gross enrollment ratio, India as a country today has close to 20%, right? If you look at all the developing countries, the average gross enrollment ratio is in the mid-30s. And if you just look at numbers purely, right? Today, you know, number of people who are into higher education is about 30 million students. There are another 120 million students who need that education.
Right.
And that's where the question of access comes in. Right. Now, yes, the government is taking certain steps in it, but it's a huge, huge task, right? And that's where I feel, you know, quality of education is definitely a big question for us to kind of address. But distance learning,
Right.
You know, you cannot have the infrastructure suddenly
You
set
can't
up
take
for
a university all
you
to
cannot.
everyone.
And
That's
the
right.
numbers are huge, right?
Right.
And so to make this education accessible to a larger number, we have to look at technology, we have to look at distance-based learning
That's an
mechanisms.
important point, right.
And some of the models that Professor Bala was mentioning.
Right.
And that is one step in that direction that would enable it without compromising the quality of education or
Right.
the student learning outcomes.
Sustainable and scalable, of course, are the words of this generation, are sort of are going to be among the most key words that the next couple of years
And
are
our
going to
community
take us.
needs it most.
Right,
Because of
absolutely,
the volume.
undoubtedly. Well, I have to take a break on that note, but there's more that we're looking at. Employability, we've touched upon that, but that's of course a key area of concern. Why are report after report increasingly saying that large number of our graduates, even those with degrees, some who've even gone to reasonably good institutions, are unemployable? What sort of crisis are we looking at there? Back after a quick break.